I've been a park ranger in southern Alaska for almost 2 decades. My beat covers the foothills around Lake Catalina and about 150 square miles of mixed terrain, dense pine forest, old glacial valleys, some serious elevation. Beautiful, brutal country. You learn to respect it early, or it'll make you humble fast. The first time I saw someone die out here, I was 32. A guy slipped down a bluff trying to get a better photo of a moose. No screaming, no drama, just gone. The wild doesn't care how careful you are. That's something I tell every new recruit. This land doesn't like people. It tolerates us. Barely. So when dispatch radioed in a search and rescue call early one Saturday morning, I didn't flinch. A group of 4 hikers hadn't checked in. Supposedly mid-30s, 2 couples from Juneau, last seen heading north on Trail 5 near Catalina Ridge. I'd walked that trail dozens of times. Rocky in places, but manageable. Still, snowmelt was thick this year. Could have been a slip, an injury, maybe a down tree. I pulled up to the trailhead around 6:40 a.m. and met my partner Luis, who'd driven in from the South Post. We did the usual, logged the time, weather conditions, checked the trail register. The group had signed in around 9:12 a.m. the day before. That lined up. What didn't line up was who called it in. The 911 dispatch said it was reported by a man named Daryl Rains, who claimed he was hunting blacktail about a mile off Trail 5 and saw the hikers go off trail, led by a park ranger. That's the word he used. Led. Like they followed him willingly. But here's the thing. I was the only ranger on duty in that sector. Luis was covering the southern range. No one else had logged hours in that area. And we sure as hell hadn't led anyone off a marked trail. Weird, but not impossible. Maybe Daryl misunderstood. Maybe it was a volunteer or a wildlife biologist in uniform. We've had misunderstandings before. Still, something about it itched under my skin. We split up. Luis took the eastern bluff loop, and I cut north, following a narrow runoff trail that paralleled the ridge. About a mile in, I found their first fire ring, faint ash, for collapsed stumps in a circle. Leftover cans, water bottles, and a crumpled receipt from a gas station in Palmer dated 2 days ago. No blood. No signs of struggle. Just gone. I kept going. I found their second camp marker 2 hours later, this one deeper into the off-trail woods. They'd definitely been bushwhacking. No one stumbles into that area by accident. But this time, something was off. There were 5 boot prints. Not 4. 5. Clearly spaced, clearly distinct. And one of them had the distinct tread of our standard-issue Ranger boots, Vibram sole, heel crosshatch. I know them because I wear them every day. That didn't make sense. No SAR team had been here yet. No one but me and Luis. And this print was older than mine. I radioed Luis. He hadn't seen anything yet. We agreed to push another hour, then looped back toward each other. The woods felt wrong. Too still. Even the birds were quiet. I found the boot 20 minutes later. Just one, half buried in a shallow ditch. Torn laces, frayed tongue, blood on the inside. No foot, no sock, just the boot. I marked the GPS and called it in. That was when we decided to escalate. Luis called in the chopper team from Anchorage. They flew in that evening and scanned the region, but found nothing. No bodies, no gear, no signs of the other 3 hikers. Over the next 3 days, we found more pieces. A torn jacket sleeve, an empty bear spray canister with the safety still on, and 4 more boots. Never a complete set. 5 boots. For people. That's when things stopped making sense altogether. 2 weeks later, the search was officially downgraded. Families were notified. Statements were collected. They chalked it up to exposure, disorientation, maybe a bear or 2. It happens. But I couldn't shake the print. That 5th boot. So I started pulling old files. Missing persons. Previous SAR reports. Anything near Catalina Ridge. That's when I found a strange overlap. Back in 2003, before I started, there was an incident logged as training anomaly. Internal report only. It involved a new ranger being taken out for field navigation orientation. 4 rangers went out. 3 came back. The file was heavily redacted, but there was a field note attached from someone named R. Donnelly, who wrote, "It was never meant to go that far." We thought he understood. When he ran, we tried to find him. But the storm came early. No follow-up. No charges filed. Just silence. R. Donnelly retired in 2012. Still lives in Sitka. I called him under the guise of checking old weather logs. He hesitated when I asked about 2003. Then, almost like a confession, he said, "You ever hear about the Gray Man?" I hadn't. He told me it started as a prank. Rangers would dress in half uniforms, just enough to look official, and test rookies in the field, lead them off trail, give them bad directions, see how they reacted under pressure. It was supposedly part of a grit test, something passed down from the old-timers. But one year, something went wrong. One of the rookies panicked, ran into the woods, never came back. No search, no report. They covered it, told the family he quit. And then the story started, hikers getting approached by rangers who weren't rangers. People being led off trails by someone with a badge that didn't match the current year's issue. Campers hearing someone circling their tents at night, softly calling their name. Donnelly sounded haunted. I thought it was just guilt, he said, until I saw him again. Same jacket, same boots, but older, worn down. And the look on his face, he's not confused. He knows exactly what he's doing. I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. I know what I saw. I know that boot print wasn't mine or Louis's. And I know those hikers were led somewhere they shouldn't have gone, not by a bear or a storm, but by someone who wanted them to follow. A few months later, just before the first frost, I found something wedged under a boulder about 2 miles west of the last camp. A park ranger's badge. Issue year, 2003. The metal was scratched. Dented, but the name was still legible. I checked our records again. There was no ranger by that name ever officially listed in the system. He never existed. But somebody wore his face and led 4 people to disappear, one boot at a time. I've been a ranger in Denali State Park for 18 years. I've worked the fires, searched for bodies, pulled half-frozen hunters off ridgelines in January, and helped birth a kid in a truck stuck on Hatcher Pass. Nothing really shakes me anymore. Or at least, that's what I used to believe. Mile 72 is where the old trapper's cabin sits, a one-room structure built long before the park's boundaries were formalized. It's tucked away off a seasonal maintenance road that's been washed out for years. We're not supposed to use it. Hell, it's not even on most of the updated park maps. But the cabin's still standing, and I check on it maybe once a year to make sure squatters haven't moved in or a bear hasn't made it a den. The last time I did that was 4 years ago. It was boarded up, cold as a freezer, and empty except for some old canned beans and a rusted lantern. Then, about 2 months ago, I was patrolling after a windstorm, checking for downed trees, blocked trails, that kind of thing, when I saw smoke rising in the distance. Not wildfire smoke. Thinner, like from a chimney. I got out of the truck and hiked in the direction of the smoke. Took me close to 40 minutes to reach the edge of the clearing. And there it was, the cabin. But this time, the door was wide open, smoke curling from the metal stovepipe, a tarp tacked across the broken window. Someone was staying there. I approached slowly. My first thought was a squatter, maybe someone avoiding town, or even a lost hunter trying to ride out the weather. I announced myself, Park Ranger, coming up, like we're trained to do. No response. Inside was warm. Stale, but warm. There was an empty sleeping bag on the cot, a half-eaten can of soup still steaming on a hot plate, and a notebook on the floor next to a Ranger-issued backpack. That's what stopped me. The backpack. It was old. Our department phased out that model in 2008. But it had a patch from our division stitched onto it, and the name tag read A. Greaves. I recognized the name. Anthony Greaves was a ranger who went missing in 2009 during a solo snowmobile recon of the northern boundary. I was still relatively new back then. We searched for days, helicopters, dogs, the whole 9 yards. Found his sled crashed in a ravine and some blood on the snow. Everyone assumed he was killed by exposure or dragged off by a bear. His body was never recovered. Yet here I was, staring at his backpack. I backed out of the cabin and called it in. A full investigative team came out the next day. I stayed behind while they swept the area. After 2 hours, they found something behind the cabin. A buried metal drum, padlocked shut. Inside were trash bags. Inside the bags were bones. Human mostly. Some partial clothing. No ID. No one said anything for a while after that. The cabin was sealed as a crime scene. We were told to keep it quiet until forensics came back. The general assumption was that someone had used the place to dump bodies over the years. Maybe a hunter gone wrong, maybe a drifter. Maybe someone knew it was remote enough that they'd never be found. But that didn't explain Greaves' pack. Or the soup can still warm. Someone had just been there. 2 weeks later, I got called into the supervisor's office. They'd found fingerprints on the stove and tin cans. Partial, but enough to run. And they matched park personnel. Not just anyone. They matched a current ranger. Someone still on active duty. A guy I knew. A guy I'd had coffee with. Let's call him Rick. Rick had been with the service longer than I had. Quiet, private, kept to himself, but reliable. Never married. No family anyone really knew about. He worked mostly the night shifts in remote posts. I didn't want to believe it. I still don't. But then they showed me the patrol logs. Rick had signed into the Mile 72 zone over a dozen times in the last 3 years. Unauthorized. Unscheduled. All late night or early morning hours. No reports filed for those patrols. Nothing in the incident system. That cabin had been in use for a while. Someone kept it stocked. Someone knew it wasn't on the map. Someone was using it as a kind of holding station. And I realized something that made my stomach turn. I'd run into Rick on a trailhead about 6 months prior, right after a missing persons case. A couple from Anchorage that had gone off-grid hiking the Glacier Rim Trail. We were all doing rounds, and I'd caught him coming out of a utility road with no real explanation for what he was checking. He'd smiled, said something about a bear sighting, and kept walking. That same week, the woman's boot was found near a stream, 30 miles from where she was last seen. I hadn't made the connection. Why would I? They brought Rick in quietly. No cuffs, no press, just an internal hold. Then something even worse happened. He confessed, but not in the way you'd think. He admitted to using the cabin. He admitted to corrective behavior, which apparently meant confronting certain people, hikers, wanderers, sometimes known offenders who'd escaped minor charges, and re-educating them in the wilderness. He talked about the resetting process, the idea that people lost touch with who they were and needed isolation to remember. His journal, recovered from his house, had entries about breaking the cycles and helping people disappear so they can start again. The bones in the drum? From 3 different people, all missing persons from the region. None of them ever reappeared. Some had been reported missing years apart. When asked about Greaves, Rick just said he wouldn't listen. We think Greaves might have stumbled on him, tried to stop him, and ended up buried out there himself. Rick's facing multiple counts: unlawful detainment, homicide, abuse of authority, and worse. The case is ongoing. Everything is sealed to the public, and the official story is that the cabin was vandalized and burned in a controlled fire. But I know what happened. I stood in that place. I saw the fresh soup, the warmth still in the walls. And what keeps me up most nights is this. There were 2 cups by the stove, and I never found out who drank from the second one. They radioed it in at 5:42 a.m. Scratchy signal, rushed voices, GPS coordinates rattled off too fast. I was already halfway through my coffee in the ranger station when it came through. Something about a bear attack near Tulloch's Bend, northern end of the reserve. By the time I reached the trailhead an hour later, the hunters were waiting for me. 2 men, late 40s, both out of breath and rattled. One had a bloody sleeve wrapped around his arm. The other kept pacing, glancing back into the trees like something was following him. Said they were part of a group of 3. We were field dressing a bull moose, the pacing one said. We heard snapping in the brush, big, heavy. Thought it was a grizzly. It came in fast. Took Dale down before we could do anything. I asked where Dale was now. He just looked at the other guy, then away. Dragged off. I nodded slowly and started the walk with them to the kill zone. About 40 minutes into the trees, across thick underbrush and down a barely marked game trail, we arrived at a clearing slick with blood. The moose carcass was there, half-gutted, flies already thick. A drag trail ran off northeast, deep into the tree line. I crouched beside it. The drag path was about 2 feet wide, lined with bent grass and broken branches. There were deep grooves in the soil, not claw marks, but from boots being dragged. No paw prints, no bear hair, no blood splatter beyond the point of origin. I've seen bear attacks. This wasn't one. You said it was a grizzly? I asked carefully, keeping my eyes on the trail. Had to be, the bleeding man said. Big, brown, fast. How far did it drag him before you lost sight? He didn't answer right away. The other guy spoke instead. We didn't follow. That stuck with me. Hunters, both armed, not even checking to see if their friend was alive. I called it in as a possible fatality and started my grid search protocol. SAR arrived by dusk, and we combed a 2-mile radius. Found no sign of Dale. Not that day, not the next. But here's the thing. That trail? It didn't go far. About 400 yards northeast, it stopped. Just ended. No bear prints, no signs of feeding, no scattered clothing. Just gone. The forest doesn't do that. Animals leave signs. Even skilled predators. Bears don't drag their prey and then vanish without a trace. And humans? They always leave something behind. That's when I started digging deeper. First, I pulled the hunting permits. The 3 men had applied together, all from Oregon, all with clean records. Except one detail stood out. Dale's permit was submitted separately, 3 days later than the others. He'd only arrived in Alaska 24 hours before the attack. Second, I reviewed the camp footage. We've got limited trail cams in that area, motion-triggered, mostly used for wildlife tracking. But one picked up something strange. Around 2 a.m. the night before, the cam near Birch Loop recorded 2 figures walking back toward the trailhead. Only 2. One of them was dragging something heavy wrapped in a tarp. No moose. No weapons. Just a bundle. And it looked too small to be a carcass. I enhanced the image best I could. One figure matched the profile of the bleeding hunter. The other wore a hat Dale had been photographed wearing earlier that day, which made no sense if Dale was dragged off by a bear 6 hours later. I took this to my supervisor. He told me to be careful. Don't go playing detective, Ed. We're rangers, not cops. He had a point, but I couldn't let it go. I contacted Dale's sister, whose number was on the visitor emergency form. She hadn't heard from him in over 3 days. Said the trip was last minute. He got a call from a buddy from college, offering a free hunting tag and a chance to reconnect. She didn't know the other men's names. That's when it clicked. There was no college buddy. This wasn't a reunion. This was a setup. The sheriff's office got involved a week later, once the discrepancies were too obvious to ignore. A forensic team combed the area and turned up something small but telling. A spent .30-06 casing under a mound of moss about 200 yards from the clearing. No signs of a bear near it, but it matched the weapon registered to one of the hunters. They brought the men back in for questioning. Under pressure, their story cracked. Turns out Dale had owed money. Not to them, exactly, but to someone who paid them. This trip was arranged through an intermediary. The 2 men were hired to take care of it, in a place where death could be explained away. Bears eat people all the time, one of them said during interrogation. No one questions a bear. They shot him in the woods, hauled the body deeper, left the mess at the kill site to fake a mauling. It was calculated, cold, covered in layers of wilderness and half-truths. In the end, we never found Dale's body. They wouldn't say exactly where they left him, claimed they couldn't remember the GPS location. The case became a media flash for a few weeks, then faded. The men were charged. Not for murder, the DA couldn't prove who pulled the trigger, but for conspiracy, unlawful disposal of human remains, obstruction. They'll serve time, but not nearly enough. And what's worse is how close they were to getting away with it. If I hadn't seen the trail pattern, if I hadn't followed my gut about the boot drag, if I hadn't asked about the permit timing, he'd just be another bear victim. It's made me see the part differently. Out here, the wilderness is the perfect cover. There are no cameras, no neighbors, no one to question the noise. You can do anything, bury anything, if you know how to mimic nature's chaos. They said it was a bear attack, but it was just people, and people are always worse. They say the wilderness doesn't keep secrets. That time and the elements wipe everything clean eventually. But I've worked Denali long enough to know better. Some things linger. Some things bury themselves so deep into the timberline and permafrost, they just wait for the right fool to stumble across them again. I'm that fool, I guess. My name's Garrett. I've been with the State Park Service going on 23 years. I was here before the cell towers, before the drone patrols, back when we blazed trails by hand and logged data with a pencil. I know these woods like I know my own mind, or at least I used to. This started with flags. Little plastic trail markers, the kind we tie to trees when we're marking new routes or closing old ones. We use colors for reference. Red for high risk, blue for riverside, orange for temporary. It's all standardized. I helped write the manual. So when I started seeing white flags tied to trees out past Bramble Loop, I figured some rookie was freelancing. It happens. Interns get overzealous. But these weren't near any official trail. They were deep into restricted acreage, land we don't touch because it overlaps disputed private claims and old mining rights. First day I found one. It was flapping in the wind on the edge of a bluff. I walked half a mile, found another, then another. They formed a path, subtle but deliberate, winding northward into country I hadn't hiked in years. The weird thing? They were new. Fresh knots. No weathering. And no one logged them. I asked around the outpost. Nobody owned up to placing them. Not the seasonal hires, not the wildlife survey crew, not even parks admin. I was told it was probably locals screwing around. Thing is, locals don't come out this far. There's no hunting, no water access, no views. Just raw, wild forest. Unless you know what you're looking for. By day 3, I'd followed the white flags over 2 miles into the off-grid buffer. The trees thinned. Snow crusted underfoot. The route grew tighter, like someone was threading it precisely through terrain no one was supposed to navigate. And still, one flag every few hundred feet, always visible from the last. It was surgical, intentional. By the 4th mile, I realized something that made me stop cold. I knew this path. Not because I'd walked it recently, but because I'd blazed it 20 years ago. Back when I was new. Back when I worked with Sam Keller. Back before everything went to hell. In 2004, Keller and I were assigned to a fire line near Hollow Ridge, same general sector. Long hours, bad maps, and a GPS unit that lost calibration halfway through. We'd been sent to assess old trail closures, but ended up exploring unmarked highland. That's where we found what the incident report would later call the site. A shack, rusted tools, shallow graves. We logged it, took photos, called it in, but the report never went further than our supervisor. Next day, Keller was gone. Officially, they said he walked off, got lost. They brought in helicopters, dogs. Nothing. Eventually, it was ruled lost in action, a rare casualty in state service. His name was added to the wall. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was, Keller found something he wasn't supposed to. And I was told, explicitly, to shut up about it. For the integrity of the land acquisition process, they said, "Do you want to keep your job, Garrett?" I kept my job, and I buried the memory. Until now. The flags ended near a small ridge, above a stream that ran black in the winter light. There, half concealed under collapsed pine limbs, was the shack. Still there. Still real. I stepped through the threshold and into the rot of old wood, and something else, something metallic. The floorboards were warped. Dust coated everything, except for a clean space in the center where a duffel bag sat. Inside, a map. My old survey map from 2004, marked with trails, redacted zones, coordinates, and written in the margin, I marked the truth. If you're reading this, it's still happening. The handwriting was Keller's. I don't remember leaving the cabin. My boots just found their way back to the station, but I wasn't the same man who left that morning. I stayed late, pulled the archived GPS data from that old mission, and cross-referenced it with the white flag coordinates. They matched. Not just close, exact, down to the 10th of a degree. Someone had reconstructed Keller's path. Someone had been in those woods with access to data no intern or hiker could get, and someone wanted me to find it. That night, I received an email from a burner account. Subject line, "You owe him." Attached was a photo. Me, in 2004, standing with 2 other rangers, supervisors at the time, outside the shack, holding the map, smiling. The caption read, "Deleted from the archive. Not anymore." The next day, the white flags were gone. Every one. I put in for personal leave last week. Said I needed rest. They didn't question it. I've spent every day since retracing that flagged path, taking photos, mapping the details. I've found more than I ever meant to. Collapsed camps, burned logs with ID tags, buried cans with shredded documents inside. This wasn't an isolated case. This land's been used, for dumping, for hiding, maybe worse. I still don't know who's behind the emails. I don't know who flagged the trail. But I know this. The wilderness doesn't wipe everything clean. Some things it keeps. Like guilt. Like maps. Like names. And it's time people knew where the flags end. There's a word we use in the Ranger Corps, unofficial, never in writing. Dead ground. It means land that doesn't belong to anyone. Places that slip through jurisdictional cracks, where signal doesn't reach, and nobody files reports. No tourists. No trails. No oversight. Cartographers leave them blank. Helicopters won't fly them unless someone's paying extra. I never thought much about dead ground. I knew it existed, everyone does, but it's like knowing there are abandoned mines in the hills. They're out there, sure, but they're not your problem until they are. That changed last October when a mining crew vanished up near Divide Basin. For men, all subcontracted by Northlight Minerals, assigned to test core samples in a disputed tract just west of our boundary line. Technically, it wasn't under park control, but we had the closest station, so when the call came in, last known contact 48 hours ago, no check-ins, helicopter spotted unmanned tents, I was the one they sent. I've done solo SR before. 32 confirmed rescues. 2 recoveries. Enough to know that when you find a camp still zipped and coffee still hot, you're either too early or far, far too late. This was the latter. Getting to the site wasn't easy. No roads, no map trails, just a loose string of ridges and glacial runoff cutting the terrain into ragged lines. The heli couldn't land, just dropped me 2 ridges east and left me with a pack, flare kit, and 3-day ration. First strange thing, no wind, not even a breeze. Usually that high up, it howls. But the air was dead still. Sky was pale gray, the kind that makes you think of old bruises. It took me 4 hours to reach the coordinates. The first thing I saw was the flags, orange survey markers nailed into the brush, running in a clean arc around a flattened clearing. At the center, for industrial tents, still standing. 1 generator running low. No motion. No people. I called out. No answer. Inside the first tent were notebooks, sample boxes, a half-eaten protein bar. In the second, a laptop still on, running GPS telemetry. The last signal was from 8:36 a.m. 2 days prior. Just stopped. Third tent had 2 cots. Blood on one. No sign of a struggle, just a soaked sheet and a single latex glove on the ground. The fourth tent had nothing but gear stacked near the back, a satellite phone with the SIM removed, extra rations, and a single hand-drawn map. Thick black marker, rough strokes. It didn't match the USGS layout. This one had red XS. 6 of them. I cross-checked against the landscape. All 6 marked something in the area I was standing in, within a mile radius. One was dead center in the clearing. I didn't sleep that night. In the morning, I started digging. Literally. The center X had loose soil. Under 6 inches of tundra was a buried panel, fiberglass, military style, weatherproof. I pried it up. Underneath, rusted barrels. 5 of them. No markings. No biohazard tape. But I knew what they were. Anyone who's worked the Alaskan interior long enough knows what it looks like when a mining company dumps illegally. These weren't from the current team. They were old. Cracked seams. Bleached metal. One had split open. The ground underneath was dead. Not just barren, chemically scorched. Like nothing had grown there in decades. I didn't have equipment to test it. But I didn't need to. I already knew what Northlight had done. What they were still doing. This exploration crew wasn't here to start mining. They were here to confirm how much they could keep hiding. I hiked a mile west to get elevation and fired the flare. When the helicopter arrived, I flagged them off. I didn't want the barrels touched. The pilot hovered, radioed in my request. 15 minutes later, my station chief came on the line, voice flat. Garrett, wrap it up. Leave the barrels. Recover what gear you can. I asked him to repeat. He did. Verbatim. I've worked with Chief Manley for 10 years. He's ex-military, by the book, never rattled. But something in his tone told me he was reading off a screen. The next day, a private extraction team arrived. Not state. No uniforms. Unmarked chopper. They cordoned off the site and told me I was relieved of field duty pending internal review. I asked what they were reviewing. They wouldn't say. They flew me back in silence. A week later, I was placed on administrative leave. The official story was that I'd mishandled evidence and violated chain of command. But it was clear they were shutting me out. Paperwork piled up. No mention of the barrels. The missing crew was listed as presumed lost in adverse weather conditions. Closed case. I called one of the miners' families. His sister. She said the company told him he'd died in a fall. No remains. No death certificate. Just condolences and a settlement check. I knew then what this really was. They weren't missing. They were silenced. 2 months passed. I stayed quiet. Watched. Waited. Then, last week, a package arrived at my cabin. No return address. Inside, a flash drive and a single Polaroid photo. The flash drive had field footage. Shaky, uncut. From a body cam. Timestamp. The day of their disappearance. In the video, 2 men argue outside the tent. One is shouting about levels exceeding containment. about orders to keep drilling. The other wants to pull out, mentions calling the EPA. Then a third voice interrupts, calm, firm, unseen. Finish the scan. We'll take care of the fallout. The camera drops. Cuts to black. Then static. And a single image, a buried barrel, identical to the ones I found, with a Northlight logo faintly stenciled on the lid. The Polaroid in the envelope? It was me, taken from the tree line during my search. Focused. Centered. Not a trail cam. Not an accident. Someone was watching. I haven't turned the flash drive in. I haven't told anyone, not officially. But I've made copies. One's with a friend in Juneau. Another buried out in the ridge behind my cabin. They know I know. They're betting I'll stay scared. But here's what they don't understand. The wilderness doesn't forget. You can bury it, bleach it, scorch it. But eventually, the land rises back up. It shows you the truth. Dead ground isn't just what's off the map. It's what's underneath it.